So I just said a minute ago that it's what I really think. I think it's what most people think, that most people accused of misdeeds are probably guilty of the misdeed or some version of it. You know, I don't think most people are innocent who are accused. But I keep thinking of Al Franken, putting myself in that position. I don't like Al Franken. I don't agree with his politics. I'll be glad when he leaves D.C. But put yourself in his position. If somebody said, Julie, someone whose name I'm not going to tell you has accused you of something, of a misdeed 11 years ago, wouldn't you say, kind of hard to respond unless I know who the person is? There is a kind of unfairness about that, and I think we should be honest enough to admit it.
You could focus on that unfairness, but you could also focus on the fact that this is not one isolated incident of one accusation against Al Franken. This is one of many of which there's photographic evidence. There are people who are on the record. There is corroboration from various sources. So, you know, if this were one sort of random person who we had no reason to believe based on other circumstances, then I might be more upset about this as Al Franken, but this is a
point. Actually, let me just agree with you. It does seem like a pattern, absolutely. But the reason I'm bringing it up now in light of the Al Franken story is because we've seen other examples where random people with no pattern at all have been accused of felonies anonymously. I'm thinking of the Duke rape case, for example, or the UVA rape case that Rolling Stone wrote about. Both of them were lies. And in both cases, the person who made the accusation was granted anonymity by the media. And that anonymity allowed the lie to persist and crushed people and wrecked their lives. And my question is, why should the media go along with this? Why should we prejudge, in effect, criminal charges by granting one side anonymity and naming the other?
Well, I think that this is really incumbent on the journalists here to be extremely careful in their vetting processes. And obviously, the UVA story in Rolling Stone was a huge example of an anonymous source gone awry, but it really is on the journalists to do extensive vetting, to corroborate, to fact check. And those were failures. I'm not saying that this is a totally perfect process and that anonymous sources never go wrong or never, you know, exaggerating or not telling the truth. But I think that the instances where they are telling the truth are those instances that allow things like this Me Too movement, this reckoning of us learning about the rampant sexual harassment happening in Washington and in Hollywood and in journalism. And, you know, those are cases propelled by anonymous sources, much like cases like Watergate or the Pentagon Papers were propelled by anonymous sources.
Again, let me half agree with you because I think you're making a smart point. There are plenty of times where you see justice done with the help of anonymous sources. That's real, and I've seen it. But I hope you'll be honest enough to concede that you open yourself up to the potential for real abuse, where you empower people when you grant them anonymity to make reckless claims and crush people. And maybe in the media, our job isn't to do that. Maybe it's just to present the facts as we know them rather than to take a side about something, the truth of which we can't really know.
I see your point, but I think that what's more important here is less the few cases of abuse that are made by people using anonymous sourcing incorrectly and journalists improperly vetting, and more the actual cases of abuse that are unveiled by anonymous reporting, whether that is these sexual harassment scandals, whether that is, you know, cases of anonymous sourcing in the past. So yes, there can be abuse of this system, but I think by and large that does not happen. Journalists are particularly careful about it.
Okay, but the difference between using an anonymous source to prove, say, corruption and one to allege sexual harassment is, in the case of corruption, you're never just going to go on the word of someone anonymously. You need corroborating evidence, documents, actual evidence that the crime took place. In the case of sexual harassment, it's enough just to have someone's word. And so that raises, if you're going to destroy someone's life, why shouldn't that person have a right to look into the face of the person making the accusation and explain himself? That's like the essence of justice, isn't it?
Well, I think that if this goes to a court of law, if Al Franken's sexual harasser goes to a court of law and accuses him of sexual harassment, then they will need to do that not under the veil of anonymity. But in this case, this is a case of journalism. This is a case of, you know, blowing the top off of this horrific sexual harassment that women are experiencing around the world. And right now, I think it's necessary. If we're talking about a court of law, that's a different story.
But finally, shouldn't we be really upset about those rare cases where the innocent are prejudged and destroyed? Shouldn't we really care about that? Not just give it lip service, but be troubled by it?
Yes.
And
we should.
B, shouldn't we acknowledge
those cases
how much,
are rare?
Well, I don't know how rare. We don't really know that. I think they're rare. I agree with you.
Your previous guest, Christie, said about 2%, and that's the stat that I've seen as well.
I'm not going to. That's a made-up statistic. But we don't really know. I agree they're rare. But the point is, shouldn't we acknowledge how much power we have in the media to destroy people, to really direct their lives, make their kids not like them? And shouldn't we take that power seriously?
Absolutely, and I think that I absolutely agree. I think that it needs to be taken very seriously. I think that the use of anonymous sources needs to be taken very seriously, but I don't think that they can be disregarded, and I don't think that the power of anonymous sources to tell really important, crucial stories that may not otherwise be told should be disregarded, because this is how we learn about things that the public deserves to know about.
I disagree with you, but I think you made some smart points, and so I appreciate your coming on.